Hi, I'm Matt, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Just in Time, a rapid fire roundup of current events in supply chain and beyond. With me this week are members of the Anvyl team. We've got our CEO, Rodney. How you doing, Rodney?
Wow, excited for this.
Cool. And from our global operations team, we've got Dan and Will. Hey, guys.
Come on, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
All right, up first, according to Supply Chain Dive, warehouse rental rates are climbing alongside demand throughout the US. In Q2, there was a 6.8% year over year increase, driven mostly by space around major cities and ports. Gentlemen, what are the high level things that a brand and supply chain managers might take away from this? What would they want to consider doing differently that they might not otherwise do? Or is this kind of a normal bump in the road? Let's start with you, Will.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. For supply chain managers, I think they're really needing to take an overall look at what's important in terms of the geography of where they're going in terms of last mile, what side of the coast they're on, if they are on one or two. I think it depends on who their providers are going to be, and then also, what their plans are for expanding. Some of this, especially on the article, they're referencing that things are obviously tight and highly dense, populated and densely populated areas, but certain companies are saying, hey, they have some ultimate flexibility depending on ultimately where they can both get trucks out of that facility, or where they're going from the perspective of their customers on that last mile. So I think overall, just having a pretty decent understanding of what your options are and what your main provider is working through is probably step one in terms of if you're a supply chain operator and seeing this article.
Great, thanks, Will. Rodney, anything to add to that?
I think what's critical with the supply chain operator is a few things. And the biggest one is the why. So why is this actually occurring? And if you look back, the reason for that is COVID. Things were getting shut down. Both on logistically, where you have less carriers, both in the ports with labor, they're letting people go. Also with distribution centers, fulfillment centers, you didn't have a lot of people there. COVID came back quicker than I think a lot of people expected. And it's a supply and demand curve issue where you have tons of supply or tons of demand, not enough supply. Now, warehouse space, people do work that, whether it's port, distribution center. So that's a why. So if you're planning for like this thing, you need to understand that. So you could assume right now is the way it's always going to be, or you could assume that once they get this worked out, fixed, it's going to be a steady state. I, for one, I'm more bullish on once this gets fixed, there will be a steady state here, but other people may see things differently. But again, it's just about why this happened and what you can do about it as an operator to prevent it or help your business. And I'm sure a lot of people are feeling this pain, with anytime you have increased costs, whether it's in this world, logistics, it's a problem. But I don't see this going to be a steady state thing going forward.
So thanks, Rodney. Dan, over to you. Do you see it any differently, or do you concur?
Yeah, I'm actually more curious on the product side, like what's their distribution channel? Are these going D2C or are they going retail? And what's the capacity for D2C in their fulfillment centers today? Are their fulfillment centers hamstring on space? Because normally those rates are baked into their fulfillment pick and pack costs at some point. So are they going to these warehouses because they're directed towards them? And then also I see these rates actually increasing the next few months, especially with holidays coming up. There's always limited space, and just anecdotally, like back in the days of Peloton, like there was a giant push on getting warehouse space early on, because for the retail side, they had to store them somewhere and then get them out to the consumers. And they're not small objects either. So I see warehousing actually getting more expensive in the next few months, especially with the delays we saw at port and more limited warehousing capabilities. So I think this trend is going to continue for the next few months.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Will.
Go ahead, Rodney.
Build upon it. I'm going to build upon it as well. You build upon it first.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, I think the one thing to Dan and Rodney's point is that this is just another good time as an operator to actually like check your contracts and see what your rates are going to be and what your agreements are. There's a lot of things that as COVID has happened and now things are easing off that you're starting to see price increases in a lot of fields, not just in the rate going up for warehousing. And so knowing what you're susceptible to versus what you have locked in, is pretty paramount.
Yeah, I was going to build upon Dan with direct-to-consumer and e-commerce. We've seen that world is a clear winner within COVID, and people are accepting buying things from home. Amazon obviously, started that shift, but you have all these other companies that are benefiting from that. And when you're looking at fulfillment, it's a different world from just taking a completed good and throwing it in a retailer. And another, when you have to pick and pack all these different SKU mixes within these 3PLs to support customers around the US or world. So that obviously has changed the way even these 3PLs operate. I don't see that going away. Direct-to-consumer is going to be huge, which that means that these direct-to-consumer companies need to be very, very focused on these partners. And that, as Will saying, the contracts are in place to support their business. Because if you just have these one-off deals, you're going to start getting crushed with these costs as they run rampant.
Excellent, thank you. Fantastic. So switching gears a little bit, e-commerce fulfillment giant ShipBob announced that it had raised $200 million in Series E funding, bringing its total valuation to $1 billion. Question for you guys. Any thoughts on what this means for fulfillment and the greater supply chain space, the general area in which they're operating? And then what does it actually mean for startups and new e-commerce brands out there? Let's start with you, Rodney.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for ShipBob. That's an amazing milestone, and congrats and kudos to that team for what they built out. That's unbelievable. I think it shows a few things, and it goes back to our first question. Number one, flexibility is paramount now. When you have issues across the supply chain, companies like ShipBob allow you to be flexible. And it's not just ShipBob. You have flow space, you have stored, you have where to go, you have flex. There's all these different types of companies in the sector that's really helping with these kind of shifts and adjustments in supply chain. So that's the first thing. The next is like the world of on-demand is not slowing down. People want on-demand everything, even warehousing. And ShipBob is clearly a leader in that space where it's like you want to get deeper into these distribution centers. Having long-term one-off contracts with a DC that's locked you in Connecticut or Nevada is just not beneficial to these fast-moving brands nowadays. You need to be able to shift quickly. Maybe one SKU is winning in one category, like one location, and the other one is in another location. You'd want to position your product in those locations as support. And you can't do things like that with the old school model. So it's showing the success in that flexibility on demand warehousing space. And that's not going to go away for sure.
Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I think to Rodney's point, like I believe ShipBob has 20 locations now globally. So if you can segment on, like these brands know what's selling where. So if they can push that, they can bring down their zone rates depending on what the weights are as well. But I think it enters a new realm of probably autonomous for a lot of these areas as well and how they're going to do their pick and pack. But I'm going to be more curious on what's that first mile experience going to be like. Historically, you see a lot of like DHL in the US, DHL handoff to USPS, then some sort of dead zone historically has always occurred, especially like in Newark, New Jersey. But then you have companies like Pitney Bowes with the Nugistics acquisition a few years ago that they have their own first mile. And there's, I think it's OHM right now that has their own as well. So I'm curious to see if ShipBob is going to enter that realm of where they're going to handle the first mile to that handoff for that to hit those homes, if it's through FedEx or USPS, or right now they have 2-day FedEx, UPS, USPS. Their rates are probably way better than the average brand itself. So you're going to get better rate management there. So there's a lot of ways I see ShipBob taking this global expansion out that should only benefit the brands that are there.
So, Will?
Yeah, no, I think Rodney and Dan hit on some of the big points. I think the one other thing that's interesting to see will be how the technology connections with ShipBob start to play out. I think we always know that when we're speaking with customers, there can be, a range of comments in terms of how easy it is to integrate in with your 3PL, but we all know that it's important. And so I think that the more they do on the technology side to keep, getting their claws into the experience will obviously be helpful as they expand more out. Similar to how Shopify is done on the web store front.
Thanks, Will. Finally, last question. Engageit reported that a recent breach of Kaseya, which is a network monitoring platform, a recent breach of their software specifically targeted supply chain customers. One of the biggest chains in Sweden had to close down 800 supermarkets as a result. This is one of several stories like this we've heard over the summer. One question for you guys is, should these smaller brands that are probably still doing things in email and in spreadsheets be a little reticent to explore cloud-based solutions for their supply chain needs? We'll go to you, Dan, first.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a whole, cybersecurity is very, very important, and they definitely need to take that seriously. At the same time, they're not a supermarket, or they're not that scale yet, so they have to be careful. I would just look out for certain things, like if you're doing a lot of email, just double check everything. Banking information is probably the most important for them for paying their suppliers. I would just be very buttoned up on your wire information, everything that deals with the banking side, and then on the customer orders too, like what's coming in, any flags or scams in that way. I think they're fine right now. They should have a lot of safeguard security in their order management side, and then they can have that conversation, making sure their supply chain information is secure. I mean, we've seen people get phished before on payment sides, but generally with those purchase orders, there should always be some sort of additional confirmation as well before they go into something huge, hopefully. But just staying alert would be the most important for any of these small brands at this time.
Excellent. Rodney, would you like to add to that?
I think supply chain IP is paramount, and just in general across everything, whether it's your design, whether it's your communication, collaboration. So whenever you're going in with any partner, you should be very, very clear with what you are going in security protocols. We intentionally, went early on SOC 2 compliance for a lot of these reasons, so we can guarantee the security of the data that we have on our platform. But I think anyone should be very, very focused nowadays on protecting that data that they have.
Well, anything to add?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times people overlook just the simple conversations and having the process in place of how you're going to tackle things. I think you start doing things and then you get to the point to where, you've done work, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, we should talk about this now, or we should talk about this at a certain point in time. And I think taking a step back and saying, okay, are we agreeing to do it in this way? Or, what's our protocols for saving information, for sharing? What drives are we using? Really the simple things that a lot of times you might take for granted when you're working as a group, especially if you're starting to expand. Those are the simple conversations you can have to button things up and keep, your data as secure as possible.
Great. Any closing thoughts? All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you, Rodney. I want to thank you, Dan. I want to thank you, Will, for sharing your expertise with us. And you in the audience for watching this. If you enjoyed it, please be on the lookout for the next episode of Just in Time by Anvyl. And to learn more about Anvyl, take a look at our website. Visit anvyl.com and learn more about what we're all about. See you next time. Thanks a lot, everybody.